I'm fairly certain that every man and woman in the world has looked at this man and thought, I want hair like him. So join me today as I share with you a hair product recipe that I have been obsessively working on. Greetings adventurers, my name is Kramer, and how in fact does Aragorn's hair look so good? In fact, most of the characters in Lord of the Rings have hair that I am generally envious of, and that is because their hair looks soft, it doesn't look like it has any product in it, and yet it like stays miraculously in the same style while also moving around with the wind. And the correct answer is, of course, that it's a wig, and I know that, but that is, while the correct answer, not a helpful answer at all, because I am not going to wear a wig every day of my life. So the question becomes, how do we replicate a Lord of the Rings hairstyle without needing to buy a wig and just using the hair that's already on our heads? Now, the first thing we have to do is isolate the thing about Aragorn's hair that we like. Obviously, it's the style, it's the romantic sort of face frame, but we have to define the actual like texture of the hair that he has in order to replicate it. So it's sort of light, it's lived in, it's a little feathery, it looks like it has weight to it, and there's a lot of curl and wave definition. The thing about a lot of the hairstyles, Aragorn's and the Hobbits mostly is what I'm thinking of, is that curl definition, but everything sort of resets. And again, yes, I know it's because it's a wig, but it's almost as if I were to like sort of picture and try to describe what I feel like the texture of that hair is, which is a weird thing to think about because it means I'm picturing touching Frodo's head and like analyzing his hair. It's weird, but like bear with me, focus. Their hair seems to retain a good amount of moisture, and I say that because it simultaneously hangs almost as if it's got a good amount of weight to it, right? Like if it were too light, or it had too much styling to it, it would sort of poof out, there'd be a ton of volume, and it wouldn't really move around a whole lot. But their hair moves around and then resets exactly where it was. And it's a really interesting texture. It almost, especially Aragorn's hair, it looks like it's just a little bit wet all of the time, but not in like a gross way. That's what I tried to replicate. Let's talk about it. And my goal overall with the product that I'm creating for myself is to have it have natural ingredients, not a whole bunch of chemicals with names that I can't pronounce, but also something that I can take on things like LARPs with me. Because the thing is, a lot of products either harden up or break down completely or look different day to day after you've already put them in. And when you're going to a LARP for a weekend, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, it actually makes it very difficult to manage the image of your character if you're constantly having to mess around with your hair. And maybe I'm hyperfixating on this, but like hair is very important to me. So I wanted something that was going to style at the beginning of the day and look the same at the end of the day, regardless of sweat and regardless of activity. I wanted something that was gonna wash out easily, something that wasn't gonna like end up looking all like filthy and grimy and like sticky. Now the first step in this is obviously to actually have your hair cut the correct way. I am not a hairstylist. I cannot help you learn how to do that. It's generally, you have to have the hair that's the right length, you need to have it layered, you need to have it texturized, and you need to have a gentle face frame coming up towards the front of your face. That's generally what I tell my stylist. And that is the foundation of allowing a product to work. But today I'm going to share with you a completely anachronistic hair product that I'm working on. But because that's not necessarily fun, what if we went through all of the ingredients and I told you whether or not they would be available historically in the medieval period, told you whether or not there are alternatives that might have been available in the historical medieval period, and then also talk about whether or not it fits as a fantasy option. Yes, let's needlessly complicate this. People in the medieval period did in fact have hair pomades. They just didn't have all of the ingredients that we have today, and it was most likely just like animal fat with seasoning? No, not seasoning, with fragrance. Fragrance is not the same thing as seasoning, though both of them tend to smell nice. So the first ingredient on our list is coconut oil, and I chose coconut oil because it's so readily available today to use as a semi-base. So let's talk about what it does for the product itself, why we're using it, and also whether or not it is historically accurate. It's not. It's not at all. Coconut oil adds moisture and softens the product, which can help it smoothly go into your hair. The problem with coconut oil is that it has a very low melting point. Even at skin temperature, it tends to get very oily, and this can result in your hair looking very oily. Very unlikely to be found in Europe. Coconut palms are, of course, tropical and trade routes from India or Southeast Asia were limited. A medieval European likely would not have access to this unless they were very, very wealthy. But reasonable historical substitutes might be something like animal fats like lard or tallow, and I also haven't tested whether or not this works with lard or tallow yet. But it would be interesting to see if it works with tallow instead. Shea Butter, which deeply moisturizes and softens hair and gives the product a creamy, smooth texture and helps to tame frizz. It's also very nice to apply to your head. In terms of 14th century plausibility, it is extremely unlikely that this would have existed in Europe. Shea Butter is native to sub-Saharan Africa, as are a couple of the other ingredients on this list. And even with trans-Saharan trade, it wouldn't have made it to medieval Europe in any sort of usable form. An alternative could be rendered animal fats like deer tallow or suet. So could coconut oil feasibly exist in a fantasy universe? I would say absolutely. And that is simply because it's a fantasy universe, and anywhere that is near a beach and is tropical and could theoretically have palm trees of some sort, the culture that is developing there might have found a way to extract the oil and use it. Now, the next ingredient is a full tablespoon of lanolin wax. Lanolin wax comes from sheep's wool, and it provides a waxy, emollient texture, and it adds conditioning and a very lightweight hold. Lanolin wax can have a little bit of a scent, but I actually really like what it does physically to my hair. So that is why we're going to use it. It's a little bit slippery, but that hold is helpful. In terms of 14th century plausibility, it is absolutely plausible that they would have had this in the medieval period in Europe. Lanolin wax is naturally present in wool and could have been collected through primitive wool scouring techniques if they knew that they wanted to use it. Now, could lanolin wax exist in a fantasy universe? Well, I would say, again, that this is obvious, and that is because if lanolin wax could have been used historically in the medieval period, plausibly, if they could have extracted it, even if they didn't, then they absolutely could have done that in a fantasy world as well. Next, we have a teaspoon of beeswax. Now, beeswax adds structure and hold, and it gives the product a sort of stiffness and helps to lock your hair into place. That is both a positive and a negative, because if you use too much beeswax, beeswax has a much higher melting point than a lot of the other ingredients, and it can be very hard. So if you use too much, the entire product will be very hard to use, and it will also pull on your hair a lot. That can also make your hair feel hard if there's too much beeswax in it. In terms of 14th century plausibility, beeswax would have been totally common because beekeeping was very widespread in Europe in the medieval period, and beeswax had tons of other uses, including candles and other salves. So it is totally possible that they could have used beeswax in some sort of hairstyling product if they wanted to. Same thing with beeswax. It existed historically, therefore it absolutely exists in a fantasy universe. Next, you will need 1/2 tablespoon of castor oil, which adds shine and slip, which means that it goes into your hair very easily. Castor oil also helps to moisturize and condition your hair shaft. It feels very good in your hair. It can be a little bit sticky though. So again, we're not going to use too much of this. In terms of 14th century plausibility, it is likely that they had castor oil in Europe, but given that it can exist in slightly warmer sort of Mediterranean climates, I would say that yes, it can exist in a fantasy universe. 1 teaspoon of bentonite clay. Now, bentonite clay is an ingredient found in many modern hair products today. It adds a matte finish and texture. It helps to texturize your hair and separate your strands a little bit, and it absorbs oils and gives volume. Now, in terms of it being plausible in the 14th century, it's technically possible, but it probably would not have been called bentonite clay and would have probably just been called clay. Clays were used medicinally and in cosmetics in the medieval period, and they also used clay when they were making bricks, so they clearly had access to it. I just don't know if it was technically bentonite clay. Possible alternatives could have been any fine or local clay. Access to any clay in the area in a sort of powder form would probably play a similar role if they were going to do this. I have no evidence to say that they actually used clay in hair products. It just comes from the earth. Processing the clay into a dry powder may vary from culture to culture, but if clay exists in the real world and it existed historically, then obviously it can exist in a fantasy. And finally, we have fragrance oil, which is again entirely optional. You could choose not to scent this if you didn't want to, but I personally think that having your character's own unique scent is an excellent way to increase immersion and identify a little bit more with your character. And then lastly, fragrance. I'm going to be using some essential oils in this, and that is just purely aesthetic. It adds some sensory appeal and personalization of the product. In terms of the 14th century plausibility, It's totally possible that they could have used something like an essential oil, though it probably would not have been made in the same way or process that essential oils are made today. But they did frequently use oils or other distillations of fragrant herbs or flowers such as lavender, rosemary, or rose. Now let's get into actually making the product, which is going to take us a very short amount of time. Essentially, the time it takes for you to boil water twice is how long it's going to take you to make this. And of course, the full ingredients list and the very short instructions will be in the description box, because actually making the product is super easy to do. So even if someone in the medieval period didn't have access to these particular ingredients, they would certainly have access to the technology necessary to actually like brew the hair product itself. Okay, let's begin. I've got everything I need right in front of me, all of the ingredients. I have the coconut oil, castor oil, lanolin wax, shea butter, the fragrance I'm going to use, and beeswax pellets. I would highly recommend using beeswax pellets instead of larger chunks of beeswax, just because it's much easier to melt. It'll take less time, it's more convenient. And of course, I also have the Bentonite Clay. A lot of this stuff is from the Now Solutions brand. It doesn't matter, I don't think. That's what I'm using because it's what was available to me in the store that was near to me. But you can get stuff online or go to a natural grocers or something near you, and they're gonna have most of this stuff. I have the bowl I'm gonna put everything in. It's metal so that I can use it as the inside of the double boiler. And then I have some measuring spoons. So we're gonna put everything except for the clay, the fragrance oil. So everything else, the coconut oil, the castor oil, the shea butter, the lanolin wax, and the beeswax all go into this. So the first thing is 1 tablespoon of shea butter. And if you're noticing a discrepancy, my measuring spoons only go up to 1/2 tablespoon, so it looks like I'm putting 2 scoops in because I am, and that equals 1 full tablespoon. And you could have multiple measuring spoons. I don't have multiple measuring spoons, but it would save you having to like clean the spoon off every time you're using it, because you don't want to get the shea butter mixed with the lanolin wax. You don't want them to touch each other. I mean, I don't think it matters ultimately, but I don't want them to touch each other. Next, we're going to use 1/2 of a tablespoon of coconut oil. Next goes 1 tablespoon of the lanolin wax. Now, I am showing this as a bit of a rough process, a bit of a messy process, a bit of an imperfect process, and that's because that's all it has to be. I'm only making this for myself. If I were doing this for friends or something like that, I might be a little bit more careful. But because I'm only doing this for myself, if you put roughly the same measurements of the ingredients that I'm putting, you should get something that you are able to happily tinker with. Now, 1 teaspoon of the beeswax pellets. We need a different spoon. There we go. And 1/2 of a tablespoon of castor oil. Okay, now everything is going to go into the double boiler. So I've got the water preheating here. I'm just going to, it doesn't have to be fully submerged, it just needs to be warm enough, and it doesn't matter if there's stuff all on the sides, because as the inner container heats up, it's all just gonna melt together. And you're also going to want to use some sort of spatula, stick, whatever you happen to have. And now it's just about heating this up, melting it all, and then incorporating it all together. All right, now we need to add 1 teaspoon of the clay. The important thing to notice here is that the product will take on the color of whatever clay you use. In my case, my clay is this chalky gray, and that is the color that my product will be. But if you use something like an Indian red clay, like an Aztec clay, which is a type of bentonite, then it is going to come out red, probably. That would be my guess. I haven't tested that. And lastly, if you're gonna use a fragrance, you're gonna put in a couple drops of that. I think I'm gonna go for about 10 to 15. I'm kind of just gonna eyeball it. So we're gonna stir that all up really, really well. And this is the point where if you wanted to, you could pour it into the tin and then froth it as it cools. I've never tried that. It seems a little bit complicated. So what I'm gonna do now is I've got sort of a admittedly modern looking tin here. And I'm gonna pour that in and let it sit overnight. You could put it in the refrigerator, it'll probably be done faster. But if you're bringing this to a LARP or on some other adventure, it's an excellent opportunity to put it into something that looks more historically accurate. And there we go. Another important thing to keep in mind with this product is that it does have a shelf life. After about a month to a month and a half, it will begin to separate because there is nothing in here in the way of a modern stabilizer to keep the oils from separating and becoming unmixed. You will be able to tell that this is happening because it will start to look a little clumpy. You will notice that putting it in your hair makes it look much more oily than it did before. Now, tips for using this. As I stated in the beginning of the video, my goal with this was to have something that was going to control hair, keep it in place without locking it. As you can see, like I can move my head and my hair moves, but it more or less does still return to the same position. So it's controllable, it's manageable, but it doesn't look or feel like it has anything in it. It defines all of the waves because that stereotypical Aragorn look is kind of like he's a ranger. He's walking around, he's sweating, so he's got that sort of almost beachy vibe, and you don't want your hair to look dirty or greasy, unless you do. If that's what you're going for, if that's for your character, then like, do whatever you want. But that's not my goal with this. So play around with it and see what works best for you, but here are some tips that I have learned from experimenting with previous batches. This works best in very small quantities. Less is more. You can always add more later, but start small. It should be like half the size of a dime. Anything bigger than that, and it's going to make your hair look very, very greasy. And especially for like my hair type, it will depend on you, but when my hair starts to get like really oily, it starts to look thinner, it loses volume, and not only does it look unclean, but it also looks like I have less hair than I do. Secondly, try using it when your hair is damp or towel dried first. I find this works way better because the water in your hair helps to distribute the oil a little bit better, and then it dries faster because of the clay that's in the product. In fact, if you put it in damp hair, it will start to feel like your hair is already dry, even if it isn't, and that's exactly what you want. It's going to be tacky when you put it into damp hair because oil and water don't mix, but once it's fully dried, at least my experience is my hair has been incredibly soft as a result of using this. Finally, you're going to want to let your hair air dry, as using a blow dryer is obviously very anachronistic, and then it has a much more sort of natural look rather than styled. When you're putting the product in, just make sure, if you want like the sort of like Aragorn tussled waves vibes, just make sure to scrunch your hair as you're putting the product in rather than like painting it in or just slathering it on there like that, because again, that's going to make it look very greasy. If you're going to put this into dry hair, it can work and it does work. It just looks a lot wetter than if you put it into wet hair and then let it dry with the water. If you put the product directly into dry hair, it's going to give it a much more sort of like directly pomade look, which may be what you're going for, but you can easily overdo it. A problem that I've personally encountered is if I'm putting it into dry hair, whatever I touch first, that section, which is usually like right here, just because of the way I touch my face, head, hair, the first place that I touch with the product on my hands, if it's going into dry hair, looks the dirtiest. It's not avoidable. I haven't found a way around it, so I use it in wet hair. Now, the nice thing about this is, and I'm not recommending this necessarily for a LARP scenario, but this product does reactivate with water. So you don't technically have to rinse it out and then start over again the next day. That's nice for day to day, and it's nice especially if you're not shampooing your hair every day, because the product will sort of stay and retain a lot of its properties. At a LARP, please don't go to one and then not bathe the entire time. That's not cool or societally acceptable behavior. But if you're in a scenario where your hair starts to get upset and you don't want to like have to redo the whole thing, shower the rest of your body, and you can just get your hands wet or get a spray bottle or just lightly dunk your head, and the product will reactivate without you having to reapply it, which is convenient if you're going to a LARP. Another reason why I'm so excited with the product that I made and happy to share it with you is because my hair type sets. I don't know about you, this may not be a problem for you, but my hair type sets very easily. If I sleep on it funny or it just dries weird, it's like done. I have to like take a full other shower or dunk my whole head in a sink or something like that, in a wooden barrel or whatever it is, in order to get my hair to then not look absolutely crazy. But what I found is that because of the ingredients that I'm using in this product, they're so malleable and they retain a good amount of their moisture content. What that means is that I actually don't struggle with bedhead at all. If this is in and then I go to sleep and I wake up, my hair's like fine. And it's so easily like remoldable. So I don't think that will be the case for everyone. I think it's specific to a certain type of hair, and I don't really understand how all of that works. But it is a bonus for going to a LARP again, not only because it reactivates with water, so in the worst case scenario, you can still reuse it without needing to apply more. Remember, applying more when you already have some in there, it's again gonna make it look very greasy because there's a lot of oil and a lot of wax in this product. It means that you don't have to worry about restyling your hair day to day during a LARP, because you wanna be out there, you wanna be fighting the goblins and retrieving the mushrooms and not standing in whatever bathroom setup they have with whatever mirror you're able to like scrounge around trying to make yourself look. That you just don't have to worry about it. And I like that a lot. Maybe I'm vain. Maybe I'm vain. I don't know. Probably I am. Maybe that has nothing to do with why I am excited about this product though. So go ahead and try it out. Let me know what you think. It's a really cool activity. I really enjoy it because it's something that you make that's more or less kind of maybe anachronistically justifiable as being a medieval, a fantasy hair product. You make it yourself and you can use it every day. And that's kind of like the entire point of living anachronism to begin with. So go ahead, try it out. Let me know what you think of it in the comments below if you do try it. I'm gonna keep experimenting it and see what more I can come up with. But so far, I'm very happy with the ratios in this recipe. And that's why I felt like I was ready to share it with you. So let me know how it goes and I'll see you very soon. In the meantime, I'd like to wish you good luck on your adventures. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much. And a special thank you to all of my patrons whose names are appearing on the screen. If this video spoke to you, please consider becoming a member on Patreon with the link in the description. Thank you for your support.